A. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness was first serialized in 1899 and then published as part of a collection of 3 pieces in 1902. The story itself is only roughly 100 pages long and is typically bundled with other Conrad selections for publication and sale. Yet it remains the author's most well-known title and continues to live on to this day, due in part to the unsettling and haunting nature of its prose. The story is told via a framing narrative, where Conrad's reoccurring character, Charles Marlowe, recounts his journey up an unnamed African river to find a mysterious man named Kurtz. This physical voyage becomes a metaphorical journey to the center of the human heart, and what's eventually found there is an intense and hopeless despair. This psychological horror is full of tension as it builds up to its finale. The jungle descriptions are especially vivid, with lighting details rendered in perfect prose, but the rest remains kinda slippery. There is an ominous uncertainty that permeates every other aspect of this compelling little book. It's among the most analyzed and scrutinized novellas in the English language, in part due to that ambiguity which invites interpretation. Marlowe himself wrestles with his tale as he tells it. He knows he's come to particular insights over the course of his journey, but he can't quite articulate them. So he leaves it to his listeners, and by extension, we, the reading audience. We're left to connect the dots that he won't, and for over 120 years, readers have been wrestling with that very challenge.
I've collected a lot of material around this book over the years, from a variety of editions to related texts. The film Apocalypse Now, and books like V.S. Naipaul's A Bend in the River, and The Headhunter from Canadian author Timothy Finley, are all indebted to Heart of Darkness. I've also picked up an illustrated edition from Matt Kish, as well as a Penguin and a Dover Thrift edition. But I actually first read Heart of Darkness decades ago as a student from this cheap little pocketbook from Bantam Classics. It features a black and white image of a struggle at sea on the cover. In this case, Heart of Darkness has been bundled with The Secret Sharer, which is appropriate as both stories are about uncanny doubling. I'm well past the point of trying to squint to reread one of my all-time favorites from a mass-market pocketbook, so as soon as I was able to upgrade to a more deluxe illustrated hardback version, I didn't hesitate. To the point where I did it twice. Yet again. So let's do this.
Whoa, double Conrad.
As you can see, both the older and the newer edition of Heart of Darkness are obviously much larger than the paperback. The older blue one is 5.5 centimeters taller and wider, while the newer black one is also 5.5 centimeters taller, but is only 4 centimeters wider. I normally save this until the end of the video, but all these old paperbacks can go straight into the box of doom, because they've been replaced. Instead, let's explore each of these hardcover illustrated editions in greater detail. Here we have the earlier release of Heart of Darkness from the Folio Society. There's actually an even earlier version called Two Tales of the Congo, which bundled Heart of Darkness with An Outpost of Progress and came out way back in 1952. But this version was published in 1997 and is presented in a blue slipcase that features a reproduction of Conrad's signature in silver on one side and a curved open edge. The book itself, like the slipcase, matches the other 16 volumes from the Joseph Conrad collection, which the Folio Society released over the course of a 9-year span from 1996 to 2005. It has a cover designed by Francis Mosley, which features the form of a figure wearing a mask, but upon closer inspection, the figure is actually made up of the jungle wilderness. Silver and black are used for the blocking of this image and are set against a dark blue cloth cover. On the spine, we note the author and title framed in a decorative band, and the publisher name at the bottom, while the binding is finished with a blue and white headband. If we crack the book open, we see plain, pale blue end papers in a nice heavy stock. The book is printed on Caxton book wove paper, which is thick, has a slight tooth, and comes in at a light cream color, according to color swatches. Now, despite the title Heart of Darkness appearing on the spine, there are actually 2 additional Conrad selections in this book, and they're the same selections, and are presented in the same sequence, as the original 1902 printing. We get Youth, Heart of Darkness, and The End of the Tether. The introduction is written by Jeremy Harding, a British writer and journalist. In this intro, he discusses Conrad's admiration for Flaubert, then addresses some of the praise Heart of Darkness has received over the years from writers like Naipaul, and the criticism it's received from writers like Chinua Achebe. After this, we get the author's note that Conrad added to the collection of 3 selections in 1917. Each selection has a plain title page, and each of Heart of Darkness's 3 parts features a simple numbering with this little flourish, which is a detail lifted from the band on the spine. Francis Mosley provides 12 interior illustrations here. Mosley's linocut work is familiar to Folio fans because he provided all of the artwork for the Conrad collection in a massive project with over 220 pieces including the covers. The art here is presented on the same stock as the text, and the images all fall immediately next to the text they coincide with, which makes for a wonderful reading experience. That's my favorite way to do it. Let's take a quick look at some of the artwork now. Here are the 3 illustrations from Youth, which actually features the first appearance of the Charles Marlowe character. And these 4 illustrations are from The End of the Tether, which focuses on an old sea captain named Wally. We'll take a more thorough look at the 5 illustrations that pertain specifically to Heart of Darkness itself. The first illustration, the frontispiece, is an image of the jungle just as Marlowe's steamer appears to be attacked from the shore. He describes human forms emerging out from the shadows, and here we see those forms along with dense foliage and a hint of the steam vessel itself. The second piece is an image of the steamer that carries Marlowe to the jungle. He describes the journey along the coast, the muddy banks, and the contorted mangroves that seem to wreathe out in despair. Francis Mosley has included all of these elements in his composition here. The third illustration is of Marlowe's fireman, who looks out at the shore from the steamer window. Next is an image of one of the 2 spearmen who guard the wild and gorgeous African woman who doesn't want Kurtz to leave the upper station. The figure's spear, his spotted animal skin, and his warlike, statuesque demeanor reveal a careful fidelity to the textual descriptions. The final illustration is of an idol that watches out over the bend in the river where the steamer is tied. This helps set the table for the final nightmare climax of this story. Now we'll take a look at the edition Folio released 17 years later. Here we have the most recent release of Heart of Darkness from the Folio Society. This version was published in 2014 and is presented in a black slipcase with a curved open edge and a striking jungle scene made up of contour lines in silver on one side. The book itself is quarter-bound in cloth with an image printed on one side. This cover illustration is by Sean McSorley and features a steamer passing through a gap in the jungle. The foliage looks like the artwork from the slipcase, but has a gray-green wash and texture, with Marlowe's ship in a deep blood red. It seems to suggest a skeletal face peering out from the cover of the book. On the curved spine, we have the author's name printed in silver. The title and publisher logo are also in silver, but feature unconventional treatments. The Folio Society initials flip the positive and negative space. The title is askew, and half the letters in the word darkness are printed light on dark, while the other half are inverted from that. We'll see this aesthetic carried over to the interior in a moment. This binding is finished appropriately with a silver and black headband. When we crack the book open, we see printed end papers in a medium stock that echo that same simplified stamp effect from the spine. They depict key images from the story and are repeated at the back. The title page features the same font from the spine, and that same stamped aesthetic is carried over to the table of contents and the 3 chapter pages. The cohesion of the design here is top-notch. The text itself is presented on Abbey wove paper, which is thick, smooth, and comes in at close to ultra white according to my color swatches. If we bring back the previous blue version for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the newer black one has marginally brighter paper, though it's certainly thicker, and the printing is darker and crisper on the newer version, which also has larger text, better spacing, and more generous margins, with less words per page. All of these elements contribute to improved readability for the newer version. The book opens with a brief biography for each of the key contributors, which is a touch I really appreciate when it's included in folio editions. The introduction is by Sebastian Barry, and it is fantastic. He begins by describing his own love of Conrad's work, which took shape as a young reader. Then he speaks to the power of Heart of Darkness's syntax, he addresses some of the issues around its treatment of race, and he finishes by clearly articulating his personal admiration for the book. The text here is vibrant and personal and spoiler-free, so it's safe for first-time readers of the text, but provides something fresh and new for those returning to an old favorite. Sean McSorley provides 7 interior illustrations here. His work features a combination of ink drawings, printmaking, and digital techniques. The art is presented on a thick, toothy stock, and the images all land within a dozen pages of the text they coincide with. Let's take a look at that artwork now. The first illustration, the frontispiece, is a scene from towards the end of the story as Marlowe and the company men have Kurtz loaded aboard the steamer. Kurtz's beautiful African mistress steps out of the jungle and raises her arms in a defiant gesture that's emphasized by the cast shadows. The textures in this piece are especially strong, with the rust effect on the steamer, the undulations in the water, and the grit of the riverbank. The second piece is an image of Charles Marlowe as he lights his pipe and begins to tell his story. He's cast in darkness with the jungle looming symbolically behind him, and the only light on the figure is coming from the match he holds between his fingers. The third illustration is of the chain gang that comes upon Marlowe as he arrives at the outer station. The prisoners walk past him with their charges above their heads, and all the details from Conrad's description are included in Sean McSorley's illustrations, right down to the rascally grin that the guard sports as he sees Marlowe. Again, the textures are deliberate here, with the prisoners depicted as pale, ghost-like forms, while Marlowe, the baskets, and the guard's coat are filled with that rusty red from the steamer on the cover in the frontispiece, creating a haunting juxtaposition. This one's my favorite of the bunch. The fourth image is from Marlowe's time at the Central Station while he repairs the sunken steamboat. The manager and his uncle are complaining about Kurtz's influence in the company, his impudence at authority, and his ambition to perhaps take the manager's position. The uncle waves his hand at the landscape and tells his nephew to trust in the darkness and the death of the environment to finish off Kurtz. I love the tree line and the use of yellow in this piece. The fifth illustration is of Marlowe's view of the shore as he tries to navigate the chaos of a surprise attack on the steamer from the bush. Moments before his helmsman is killed, Marlowe sees vague forms of men on the shore, flipping in and out of the shadows. The sixth image is of Kurtz's young Russian disciple, with his bold gesture and his patchwork clothing. I like the impressionistic, textured background here, which contrasts with the fine illustrated details of the vegetation in the foreground. The final image features the only depiction of Kurtz in the book. This is from the scene where he crawls out on all fours from his hut, away from the Europeans that have come to pick him up, and towards the Africans who await him around a bonfire in the jungle. Marlowe intercepts him and confronts him. He is described as pale and skeletal, almost made out of ivory himself. Although he's frail, Kurtz's voice is still powerful and full of vigor as the two discuss his options. Marlowe is cast in heavy shadows here as his back's to the fire, while Kurtz is lit up with an appropriately tragic and contorted look on his face. So which one of these editions of Heart of Darkness is the best? Well, if price is removed from the equation, then it isn't even close. While both books are comparable in terms of the cover art and the quality of the bindings, the newer black version has better paper and a stronger introduction. I have a particular affinity for the complete Joseph Conrad collection, and I'm an appreciator of Francis Mosley's lino cuts, but I feel that the artwork gets stronger later in the series, and the specific pieces that pertain to Heart of Darkness are unfortunately not among the best of them. Sean McSorley's color artwork and the impressive cohesion of the design in the newer edition make it the clear winner. But when cost and availability are factored into the discussion, things start to even out. The 2014 Black Edition is getting very pricey on the secondary market, and it can be difficult to find. The older blue version is relatively common. I know that there's been at least 4 printings, and it can often be scooped up at a fraction of the cost of the more recent release. When you consider that you're getting 2 more selections beyond the title story, it certainly delivers the better value. Still, I'm happy to have both, but I'm going to have to ease up on the Conrad double up, because I've got to save room on the shelves for more new books. As always, thanks for watching, and if you'd like similar content, feel free to circle back to previous videos, or keep an eye on this channel for future upgrades.